Didn't wake up to hear that Wigs R Us is about to pardon the Honduras president. No, please tell me I'm dreaming, because I could have sworn this president, this Honduran president, was trafficking major heavyweight into this country and was sentenced for trafficking that weight throughout the United States. Now, Juan Orlando Hernandez was just sentenced last year, baby, under the Biden administration for trafficking weight and weapons. The boy has a 45-year sentence. He ain't even start yet. But Wigs R Us wants him out of that fucking jail cell so he can go back to Honduras and run for the presidency. Because he does not want what happened in Venezuela to happen in Honduras. Because we all know that Venezuela is ready to pop off on us. Now the gag is, Wigs R Us is attacking the Venezuelan president and all of his little boats because he says he's trafficking weight into the United States. So you gonna release another one that's already been convicted for that shit? Can we say corrupt? Corrupt. I'm tired of this man. I really fucking am. I know I didn't wake up to hear that Wigs R Us is about.
This just in, Donald Trump has announced that he will be pardoning one of the world's most notorious drug traffickers. In a new post, Trump said that he will issue a full and complete pardon to former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was convicted of drug trafficking last year in the U.S. and sentenced to 45 years in prison. Hernandez was found guilty by a jury of conspiring to traffic 400 tons of cocaine into the United States and was described as being at the center of one of the largest and most violent drug trafficking conspiracies in the world. He effectively ran his country as a narco-state, and prosecutors said he paved a cocaine superhighway to the U.S. protected by machine guns. Hernandez is responsible for the deaths of countless American citizens, yet Trump claims that he was treated very unfairly. Hernandez took bribes from cocaine traffickers and used his office to shield them. And so let me get this straight for a second. While Trump orders the killing of alleged drug runners at sea and claims he's doing it to stop the flow of drugs, he's simultaneously bailing out the kingpins who use their power to help the cartels flood the United States and other nations with narcotics. Spread the word. Follow for more. A new Midas Touch podcast is out now. Be sure to check it out.
Trump is pardoning another criminal, but who is surprised? On the millionth episode of Donald Trump Throws Hissy Fit on Truth Social to get what he wants, Donald Trump has decided that what's going on in Honduras is more important than what's going on here in the United States. And he said that if Tito Esferrer, who was the conservative candidate for the presidential race, does not win the seat, he is going to become an even bigger bitch. And I don't even know how that's possible. At the same time, he announces a pardon for Juan Orlando Hernandez, who was sentenced to 45 years in prison for drug crimes. Donald Trump states that he was treated very unfairly. The 34-count convicted felon believes that another motherfucker that was arrested and convicted and charged with 45 years was treated unfairly. Who the fuck is surprised about that? Because remember when Donald Trump pardoned all those J6ers? Do you know that a vast majority of them are already back in prison for child sex crimes? Does that, do these things surprise you? Because they don't surprise me. Donald Trump is hell-bent on a couple of things. Making himself richer, making his donors richer, and then just allowing the worst scum of the fucking earth run rampant in the streets because they are the only people that support his nasty funeral makeup, dirty diaper wearing ass.
He was a two-faced politician who masqueraded as an anti-drug crusader while partnering with traffickers. No, the judge wasn't talking about Trump yet. That was about the former president of Honduras, who ran it like a narco-state, protecting traffickers and their shipments, like his brother and others like El Chapo Guzman, who gave millions in bribes to his campaign to get him elected. Oh, and he made the controversial decision to run for president again, despite having a constitutional prohibition against it. He won, and despite widespread calls for a new election because of the huge amounts of fraud and violence during the first election, he was given the legitimacy and recognition he needed to claim victory by none other than Donald Trump. I'm not sure how the United States can hope to have any kind of credibility or legitimacy in their war on drugs when they're bombing boats in the Caribbean and committing extrajudicial killings at the same time that they're pardoning kingpins who were convicted of conspiring to bring in over 400 tons of white stuff into the United States of America.
We have some breaking news tonight. Donald Trump just pardoned former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez, a man convicted in U.S. federal court for helping move tons of cocaine toward the United States. Hernandez is serving a 45-year sentence after a New York jury found he turned Honduras into a drug corridor, taking cartel money and protecting cocaine shipments with the power of the state. And now Trump says Hernandez was, quote, treated very harshly and unfairly, and vows to wipe away that sentence. And the timing of all of this is not an accident. Honduras is just days away from a pivotal presidential election. Trump is openly backing Hernandez's ally, conservative candidate Nasri Tito Asfura, and has threatened to cut U.S. aid if Asfura loses. Put that next to what else his administration is doing. This is the same president who has ordered U.S. forces to bomb small boats off the coast of Venezuela and across the Caribbean, saying that they're loaded with drugs bound for the United States. Dozens of people have been killed in those strikes, many of them never formally charged with anything. None of them have been charged with anything. But if you are in a wooden boat suspected of carrying drugs, you can be blown up in the open sea. But if you are a former head of state who was convicted of protecting cocaine routes into the United States and you're aligned with Trump's political agenda, you can get a presidential pardon. And that's the contrast between all of this. Donald Trump is a very unserious person. He told everybody that he's doing everything that he's doing because of narco-terrorism, his war on narco-terrorism and crime, right? As justification for everything that he is doing. But this White House claims to be waging war on drugs while rescuing a man found guilty of running a narco-state right as his allies are headed into an election. If you believe independent journalism like this matters, consider supporting the show through Patreon or a YouTube membership with added perks. For as little as $1 a month, you can help us keep telling the stories that go far beyond the headlines and bringing valuable information to the masses. We don't have big donors or sponsors. We are truly building this pure and from the ground up. If you've gotten something out of these videos, please consider becoming a supporter today and be sure to follow the show so that you don't miss any new updates.
Okay, so earlier today, it was announced that Trump is going to pardon the former president of Honduras, Orlando Hernandez. And let me tell you what's weird about this shit. So in 2024, Juan Orlando Hernandez, former president of Honduras, was convicted in the United States for drug trafficking, arms, and he was sentenced to 45 years. Okay? And apparently Trump is on Truth Social talking about, oh, this was unjust, it was unfair, this great man, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to pardon him. And this is the NPR article. It mentions in the article that he had served 2 terms as president. So something else that Trump did was that he announced that he was supporting Tito Asfura, who is the conservative candidate running for president right now in Honduras, by the way. They're having elections right the fuck now. It looks like election day is on the 30th. Their elections are happening now, which this seems to be a pattern with Trump, right? I feel like just a few months ago, maybe it was Argentina, where he was on the same shit, dicking around publicly and just telling the people to elect, basically telling the parties that be in that country to make sure that the conservative candidate wins, right? Whatever. Of course, you remember, we just did this a little while ago because he gave them $40 billion. So this is what he says on Truth Social today. He says, basically, if y'all don't elect Tito, we're not going to be sending no money your way. We're not going to be throwing good money away if you're not putting the right person in office, which is the conservative guy that has been, by the way, credibly accused of embezzling money of public funds. Of course, right? Of course. Trump also says, well, if Tito Asfura, I'm sure I'm saying it wrong, sorry. If he loses, then, the country's going to go to crap like Venezuela is right now. Remember whose boats he's bombing right now. I'm sorry. Remember whose boats we are bombing right now. Whose boats are we attacking right now? Venezuela. Actually, I found this article from 2018 in the LA Times, and it's right before Hernandez's last election. It says he's the first president to be elected for 2 terms. Why? Because their constitution does not allow for more than 1 term. So what did he do? He got a majority in the Congress and the Supreme Court. And then in 2015, there was a court ruling under Hernandez's term, basically saying that he could get a second term. In 2017, his brother was charged by the DA here in Miami for moving drugs and arms and stuff for the Mexican cartels. Also, he was using the Honduran army and military in order to do that. Isn't that crazy? So yeah, by 2018, by the election, that, you know, everyone's like, no, this election is invalid because fuck he doing? Can't do this shit. He put the military out in the streets while people were protesting, and a bunch of people died. People were jailed. You know, all the things. You know, he put the military up in the Capitol, right? Sound familiar? It should sound a little familiar. It should. Now I found this other article from 2021 because, you know, I read the first one, like, what the fuck's going on? I don't know anything about international stuff, but I find it very odd that Trump is paying this situation any attention at all. So the article from 2021, you may want to grab some tequila for this one, so the article from 2021 talks about one of the things that he did while he was in office was he expanded the military into public spaces regularly. He also created elite military groups, basically, that had been charged with civil rights violations. And all this is in addition to the embezzlement, fraud, all those allegations that were between his family. His sister was in some part of the, like, just whatever you think is happening now here, it was happening over there times 10 at that point. And also talks about how the people are fighting against the palm oil corporations and the paramilitary group, the paramilitary groups that Hernandez created and started to serve corporate interests are driving the people out of the area. Which reminds me, that's how people end up in our country. Anyways, they're doing the same thing to the black people in the area, the people that are on the water. They're close to the water because now they want that waterfront property, right? Even though I'm sure whatever corporations he's working with and using the military for are connected to us. Now, currently there's a liberal president, and of course he left behind his buddies in every branch of government. So, and then it talks about how since he was expected to be extradited by the U.S. because obviously his brother was charged by the DA, obviously his ass was next. He started making public announcements about, you know, hooking up with China and basically people that are not supposed to be our allies, basically. Like, okay, well, y'all gonna fuck with me, then I'm gonna, you know, hook us up some connections over here, basically. And the other thing it talks about is how he was planning to seek refuge in these, like, corporate enclaves that had been created within the country that had whole new legal systems and everything. What does that sound like? Does that sound familiar? It should sound familiar. It sounds like Elon's little cities. We're just gonna start popping up all over. Again, what the fuck do y'all think about that? It's so interesting what he's doing. Very transparent, but he's essentially, what it looks like to me is he's trying to set up his own little conservative dictatorship allies. That's what he's doing, where they can all work together to make as much money as they can and do as much horrible shit as they can do. What do y'all think? Let me know. Bye.
PBS News has reported saying that President Donald Trump said Friday that he will be pardoning former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who in 2024 was convicted of 4 drug trafficking and weapons charges and sentenced to 45 years in prison. He goes on to his Truth Social and he says, additionally, I will be granting a full and complete pardon to former President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who has been, according to many people that I greatly respect, treated very harshly and unfairly. This cannot be allowed to happen, especially now after Tito Esfera wins the election when Honduras will be on its way to great political and financial success. Then he gives his endorsement to Tito Esfera for president and congratulations to Juan Orlando Hernandez on your upcoming pardon. On the DOJ's website, they're saying the reason why he is spending 45 years in prison is because Hernandez conspired with some of the largest drug traffickers in the world to transport tons of the white stuff through Honduras to the United States. So then let me get this straight. You are pardoning someone who actually was doing that stuff, but you have been blowing up boats in Venezuela because you think that they're doing that stuff and bringing it to the United States. Make that make sense. What?
Well, 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 if it isn't your entire excuse for war crimes and attempts at starting a war in which to crime getting completely blown up. Kind of like those boats you keep war criming. Trump has announced his intent to pardon Juan Orlando Hernandez, the former Honduran president, who was convicted of conspiring with none other than El Chapo himself to import hundreds of kilos of powder into this country. You know what's interesting? The judge in this case actually described Hernandez as a, quote, two-faced politician hungry for power, end quote, who masqueraded as an anti-drug crusader while partnering with traffickers. Does that sound like anyone you know? Just a little tidbit there. You know, apparently he received a bunch of campaign donations or bribes from Pe0ple. I wonder what would motivate someone to release an individual like this. Mind you, before he's even served much of his sentence at all, he was sentenced just last year in 2024. He's supposed to serve 45 years. It sounds like he's going to serve fewer than one. Wow. By the way, he was convicted in Manhattan, so, you know, just another case of a blue president's DOJ in a blue state cleaning up the streets. Just for another Republican to come in and release the criminals onto the streets, I assume for the right price. So tell me, those boat attacks, are they about stopping the drugs or starting the war? And just so we're clear, if any of this takes you by surprise, that's a skill issue. I've said from the beginning, Trump is trying to make Maduro his Noriega, down to practically the exact same accusations and charges, all for an excuse to invade a country that has something the U.S. wants. Maduro can be a bad guy, but that doesn't give the United States free rein to invade a country just because it wants to, especially not if the only reason it's doing it is to get its grubby little mitts on the oil. By the way, to the no new wars crowd that somehow fell for all of this and will no doubt come up with another excuse for Trump, are any of you going to wake up and start to realize that drill baby drill is just propaganda to get you on board with this stuff? There's too much money in it for big oil to give up a system that completely relies on them and their control over a finite resource. But of course, you're completely incapable of seeing it. Listen, I would love to know, I mean it, I would really, really love to know why releasing this guy and blowing up fishermen's boats that are allegedly at the very, very bottom of this food chain is a good strategy to achieve what they're claiming they care to achieve. He's full of it, and he always has been.
Trump says he will pardon the former Honduran president who was convicted of drug trafficking. This is one of the biggest drug traffickers not only the U.S. has ever seen, not only South America has ever seen, but the world has ever seen. And Trump wants to pardon him. All while blowing up boats with fishermen on it, talking about, oh, these are drug traffickers, not showing any proof, not showing any legal reason, just because he says he can do it. This man was convicted of bringing 400 tons of cocaine into the country, right? He's so high up on the drug trade that instead of building tunnels to sneak stuff around, he just built his own private road and had it lined with mercenaries. He made a cocaine highway, literally. He's one of the biggest drug dealers and traffickers that not only the U.S. or South America has ever seen, but the world. And Trump wants to pardon him. And I think we should be paying attention to what's happening in the White House right now, right? Like, we talk about the lying and the scams and so forth. That's one thing. But there's a horrific trend of these ruthless, like, horrible dictators that Trump is pardoning and dealing with. Like the El Salvadorian president. Like this guy. Like the guy who was literally a terrorist, who literally had parts to do with 9/11 in the White House. You know what I mean? Like, it's weird. It's weird. The Crown Prince that had that reporter killed, and he's defending him in the White House. All these people, right, who run horrible dictatorships. It's almost like he's making plans on doing that here. And it's almost like he's building a network of people who can defend him outside of the UN.
You can't claim to be protecting the U.S. from drug traffickers and then go ahead and pardon a major cartel leader. That's just not a f***ing thing. Oh my God. I'm going to need every single Republican to look me dead ass in the face and try to persuade me that this president, Donald Trump, this administration is doing everything that they can to curb drug trafficking when he is pardoning the people who are guilty of perpetrating that. That's like the opposite of keeping this country safe. And I know that I'm talking to Republican politicians and the bar is in hell, but like, here's your logic. Let me show you how your logic works out here. If I have a tire with consistently low air pressure, what you're advancing is that I not change that tire. No, not fill it with more air, but actually let more air out. And then I'm going to have a smoother ride. What the are you saying? Do you see how fucking stupid that sounds? But somehow, even more concerning than that, former Fox News drunk and current Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is a war criminal, loudly and very publicly on the internet. And like everything he does, and this administration does, it's embarrassing. Allegedly, the Navy SEAL Team 6 conducted a missile strike on a drug boat in the Caribbean. Is it actually a drug boat? We don't know, because the U.S. government has essentially said, trust us, bro. And here's the thing, the U.S. doesn't have the best reputation in that department in normal time. Now, so should we have been there? No. Should we be openly firing on people boating in the Caribbean? Absolutely not. But we did. However, 2 people survived that initial strike, so Pig Hegseth, I'll allow it, gave a verbal command to, quote, kill them all, meaning to kill also the survivors that are in the middle of the Caribbean Ocean, Atlantic Ocean. I'm from Florida. Hey! You can't do that. That's a war crime. If they're surrendering, you can't just decide to unilaterally kill them. I understand due process is a difficult concept for the Republicans, but even you, surely even you understand the rules of war. I mean, you are f***ing leading this entire armed forces. I would hope you know the basics, but you don't. And you're on Twitter admitting that because you're saying that Biden coddled the terrorists and we kill them. It's right there. Black and white. Or white and black, depending on how you like it. I mean, don't hold your breath, but the Senate Armed Forces Committee, it does say that they're looking into this. They're investigating this. It doesn't look good. We don't have any business being there in the first place. I mean, the Caribbean is not our border. There is no imminent threat. You don't get to just do things like this if there's no imminent threat. Again, I don't understand why I have to explain the rules of engagement to someone that's running our whole ass military. Anyway, maybe stay on top of your members of Congress and let them know that your expectation is that they put a stop to this because it's
Donald Trump is getting ready to pardon the former president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who's currently serving 45 years in U.S. prisons for drug trafficking and weapons charges. So A, why is he in jail? And B, why is Donald Trump pardoning him? Let's go ahead and break it down. Back up, Donald Trump made the announcement about Hernandez on Truth Social, saying that he's going to get a full and complete pardon, arguing that the former president was treated harshly and unfairly. In the reality of it, Hernandez was convicted of, accepting millions of dollars in bribes from drug cartels. And prosecutors said that he helped create what's called the quote-unquote cocaine superhighway straight into the United States. Which, if you know, President Trump right now is trying to stop a lot of drugs from coming into the United States. That's what's going on in the Caribbean. So why would he pardon Hernandez? Ultimately, it comes down to loyalty. Hernandez, inside of Central America, had been a key ally for Donald Trump, and Donald Trump does reward those who are loyal to him. And because Donald Trump does have a long history of defending his allies, we're now going to be seeing him get a pardon if Donald Trump moves forward with it. My question for you is, do you think he should be pardoned? Let me know in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to keep you guys updated.
President Trump has announced his plan to pardon former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who's currently serving 45 years in a U.S. prison for smuggling substances as well as smuggling weapons into the country. Apparently, according to Trump, he was treated very harshly according to people he greatly respects, but apparently that person he greatly respects is Hernandez, who had been adamant that the whole time this was just a plot by the radical left. And I guess that kind of curried favor with Trump's mentality. But it is funny because all the snow that Hernandez was convicted of smuggling into the country is the exact same story as to why we're going after the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro. So doesn't really make sense to get rid of one unless the real reason we're trying to, invade Venezuela is for their oil and rare earth minerals, which that one Republican congresswoman did just flat out say in an interview.
Riddle me this. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. It'll be like dead.
But then he makes the decision to let someone who was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison for importing the largest amount of cocaine into the United States, let him go. Coincidentally, this happened just days before the Honduras presidential election. When Hernandez was president of the Honduras, they were known by all federal prosecutors as a narco-state. That means that the government benefits from the sale of drugs and that the cartels have influence over the decisions the government makes. So, Venezuela bad, cocaine president good?
Hey everybody. Donald Trump just announced that he's pardoning one of the largest foreign drug traffickers in the world. For lack of a better word, this is insane. I'm Liz Oyer, the former pardon attorney for the Department of Justice. Juan Orlando Hernandez is the former president of Honduras, a country of about 10 million people in Central America. During his presidency, Hernandez turned Honduras into a narco-state, meaning the government itself worked in partnership with drug traffickers to export drugs around the world. Hernandez took millions of dollars of bribes from major international drug traffickers. He partnered with cartels, including the Sinaloa cartel. He even took $1 million bribe from El Chapo himself. In exchange, Hernandez used his police and military forces to protect these drug traffickers, including using violence when necessary. Under his leadership, Honduras became one of the most violent and most corrupt places on earth. It also became one of the largest export points for cocaine shipments to the United States. In total, Hernandez was responsible for sending 400 tons of cocaine to the U.S. That's billions of individual doses of drugs. Hernandez was extradited to the U.S. to face trial. In 2024, he was convicted by a jury and sentenced to 45 years in prison, plus an $8 million fine. He was also ordered to forfeit over $15 million in drug proceeds. His conviction and sentencing was the result of over a decade of work by U.S. law enforcement and national security professionals. And then, Donald Trump just wiped it all out in an instant with a pardon. Why did Trump do this? No one knows. Trump is supposedly so concerned about drug trafficking that he is literally blowing boats out of the water. So it makes no sense that he would set this guy free unless there's something in it for him. Once again, Trump is putting his own interests ahead of the interests of the American people. His pardons are growing more and more dangerous and corrupt. Please help sound the alarm by sharing this information and by asking your elected reps to demand accountability for presidential pardons.